I'll get Rod.
of the resident. I agree with you too.
Started here. Well, now that we're all here, if you have a cell phone, please either turn it off or silence it. I will call the work session for the Oregon City Commission to order for Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle-Smith.
I'm here now.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
I'm here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
I'm here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
I might be here, but in a different dimension.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here, moving on. Anybody have any future agenda items for the work session? Seeing none, move on. Mr. Conkle, list of future work session agenda items.
Thank you, Mayor. So we've identified what we anticipate to bring forward. We're actually, from the time that we put this out, we had the discussion about annexation, so we anticipate to bring that back on next Wednesday, November 20th, for a work session starting at 6 p.m. prior to the regular scheduled meeting at 7 o'clock.
Okay. That's it. All right. Move on to discussion items. PC 19-121 Downtown Transportation Demand Management Plan Implementation Update, including after-hours parking program is Turway.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Reed, a planner with the city.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Community Development Department. I'm here to give you a quick update on the Downtown Transportation Demand Management Plan and the after-hours shared parking program we've been developing. I'm not necessarily looking for any action today, as this is a work session, but here to answer questions, and if all is well, then we'll continue to do what we're doing. So we all know that downtown is squeezed between a cliff and a river, and we don't have unlimited space for people and for their cars. But we like when people come downtown and enjoy our local businesses, and we want more people to come downtown, but not necessarily more traffic congestion and more people circling the block looking for parking space. And not only do we want more people to come downtown, we know we will get more people downtown when the Riverwalk opens. So the Transportation Demand Management Plan will help us now with our current situation downtown, and will prepare us for when that Riverwalk does open and we have an influx of visitors downtown. The goal of the Transportation Demand Management Plan is to add capacity downtown by increasing the universe of trips, and that includes all types of trips: driving, transit, biking, walking, taxis, etc. And the goal is to provide real choices and then let people know that those choices are available to them. So in 2016 and 2017, we went through a process to develop the Transportation Demand Management Plan.
That's the first time I've ever been busted.
He's not pointing at me.
Wow. That's not bad, 4.5 years.
4.5 years that you haven't actually been turning off your phone.
No, I've been turning on that phone. All right.
Good job, Colin.
I apologize.
So the Transportation Demand Management Plan was adopted by the City Commission in 2017, and then last year we began implementation. The to-do item the number one to-do item on the list in that plan is to form a group that would oversee and implement this plan. So the city created what we're calling the TDM working group. It's a group of downtown stakeholders, transportation folks, agency folks, that has been meeting for this past year to start the work of this plan. The group is facilitated by Rick Williams of Rick Williams Consulting. He's in that photo right there pointing at a poster. He helped us create the TDM plan, and he has conducted two parking studies, two of the downtown parking studies within Oregon City. He's very, very experienced in TDM throughout the Pacific Northwest. We also, the city won a regional travel options grant from Metro of $150,000 over the next 3 years to start to work on some of the projects that are identified in the plan. So this group has formed subcommittees to take on that work and utilize that funding to move us forward. And some of that work I wanted to share with you tonight is creation of an after-hours shared parking program for downtown and the midtown kind of area above the elevator. Earlier this year, you passed code amendments that legalized after-hours shared parking, and we have been working on draft signage, on draft agreements that we would enter into with property owners, and we've been reaching out to downtown parking lot owners. We have 2 downtown parking lot owners that are ready to get started with the program. And City Hall, I believe, is ready to also participate in the program as well. There was discussion of the VFW parking lot participating as well, and we've spoken with folks from the VFW about that. They're aware of it, and they are, interested in continuing that conversation if we see a need.
VFW's parking lot.
That's
I'm sorry.
right.
We own not the
Right.
VFW's parking lot.
Right.
So why
Right.
why wouldn't we be doing it?
We've reached out to them to let them know that
we're
because
doing
it would affect them clearly if we instituted this in that parking lot, and so if the need arises for more parking in that part of town, we'll continue, pursuing that.
Seems to me the VFW is pretty good hike away from downtown for that. The only businesses that I could see would be benefited by the Stillhouse and the tavern across the street.
Right.
I'm
So
sure I would agree with that.
So I think at this point, the parking lots that would be part of the program from the get-go, at the beginning, would be City Hall, and then these 2 downtown parking lots, and then any other downtown property owners that end up responding to that and showing interest.
And I just want to add one more thing about VFW, and that's that during this research, we realized that there is no parking agreement with the VFW to use that lot. So we figure we should probably get a parking agreement with them in place before we start doing these after-hour things anyway. So one step at a time.
Yeah.
So this is the draft signage. You see the Oregon City logo. That logo would be whichever business is providing the parking lot. We would put their logo on the sign. We'd work out with them what the hours would be. So if the business closes at 5 and they want to make their parking lot available at 5 p.m., then we can make sure that's indicated on the sign. And then the city would provide the signage. We would own the signs, and then the parking lot owner would then allow free public parking during the hours that are posted. Our insurance company and our city attorneys have reviewed the signage and the draft agreement that we would use to enter into with these property owners. And so, if all sounds well, then we would move forward with this program after
So
this
what do the
meeting.
property owners get?
They get the goodwill of downtown.
And it's
There's really nothing except that's really in it for them at this point.
Okay.
We
I think
have,
Commissioner Smith did you have a question?
Yeah,
As do I.
Commissioner
I
Smith.
can wait. So I guess go back to where it says courtesy of, that kind of implies that they're getting something out of it more than a sign, or that we're like contributing something as the city to make this happen, which we're really not, other than putting a sign up.
these would be the signs that would go up at City Hall.
These would be the signs at City
So,
Hall and not the ones at the
The logo
lots.
here would be,
their
say,
whoever.
their logo, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then I don't want to open this up to, I guess I do, but my question about, I understand the issue with VFW. I think that, one, people aren't parking there because they don't know they can. It is a little bit of a distance, but the amount of traffic that I'm seeing on the promenade every night compared to what we used to see is extensive. And so I know that, more people are using the promenade and sometimes just like to walk the promenade. So it's not just about whether or not they're going downtown to a restaurant. It's whether or not they have a place to park. If the parking lot at City Hall is full or the parking lot on the street's full, that they can park at the VFW, walk down the promenade just to enjoy the park. There's nothing there that says it's a city's parking lot. And I think if we're going to be consistent, we need to be consistent with all the city parking lots. And the Pioneer Center is another one. I find it really odd that we have always used the Pioneer Center parking lot as an open parking lot. And we've always let the church park there. We've always said in the building of the library that we had that lot as an additional parking lot for the library. But in the last few months, or maybe in the last year, I don't know how much, but brand new signs have been put up that says parking for Pioneer Center only, which I think is crazy.
You mean the lot across the street or the one behind?
The lot across the street from the Pioneer Center, which I think has to do with that conversation where we were kind of deciding which lots went with what properties when we were doing the parks discussion. Mm-hmm. But the Pioneer Center parking lot should be a library parking lot, or should be available for the public, for library or for just walking around the neighborhood or whatever. So I don't see the difference between those three parking lots that we know, and then maybe we own more than I know of, but at least those three parking lots that are city owned up on the hill. If we're doing it at one, we should be doing it at all of them.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Well, first, I'd agree with everything Commissioner Smith said. Second, it's just as a matter of curiosity to me. There's $150,000 in grants. Can you enumerate what are we doing with $150,000? We're going to spend $2,000 for signage, but we got to spend $150,000 to accomplish the task. What is it? What are the projects?
I'm getting to that next.
I'll be glad to listen.
Yeah.
Please proceed.
Can I just get clarification then on this before we move to other topics? So it sounds like we're going to proceed with what we've got, and then the commission wants us to continue to investigate looking at other parking lots that are city-owned for opening up this after-hour program as well?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think Commissioner Smith was quite clear.
Okay.
So I do have a question. So the Pioneer Community Center gets rented for things, and people who are going there for an event have an expectation that they're
For
going
the
to
evening? That's
yes,
true.
they're going to be able to park. So I think we need to look at that carefully before we sign it. Open parking, because if they have an event there that people are paying to use the center, they're going to want some parking. So maybe there's another option that when there's not an event, signs are up, and when there is, it's not. So just because it is used.
And that may be exactly why they changed the signs, but I think that was never communicated to the public, and I think that's, knowing that makes perfect sense. So how do you juggle that?
Yeah.
But I know we basically, when the issue came up about the library, well, there's not going to be enough parking lot, we said, well, you can park there.
It was not the conditions of approval, but it was mentioned in the staff report that could be used as overflow parking for the library.
Right.
So,
but now it can't, because it says clearly can't.
All right, so we'll proceed with what we've got and continue marching down to look at other parking lots then?
It just doesn't sound that hard. I mean,
how soon would we be able to do that?
I just want to talk to Parks to see.
Let me go back to the reality of the situation. Jim, do we enforce parking at that parking lot?
Well,
At what time?
Well, during the day. How do you tell if somebody's in the senior center or the library?
You can't.
you can't.
We're just walking around the neighborhood.
You can't.
So we don't enforce that parking.
No.
So the only reason the signs are there are to keep, Joe average person from just parking there
Right.
for
But
whatever.
the signs have only been put up in the last year. They've never been there before. It was always clear it was you could park there.
Well,
for the
I think
library,
we
you could
should
park
get
there
an
for
explanation
planning.
from Ms. Wiseman
Yeah.
before we go too far down this path.
The one thing I could say is that giving people a place to go, even though we may not necessarily enforce some of these things, it's kind of like parks. A lot of people voluntarily will park in places, and it's at least a place that you can say to somebody when they go, well, where can we park? Well, you have options.
Right.
A lot of people do comply without having to.
Sure.
Well, I think sometimes there's event parking too, just like we do at the end of the Oregon Trail. At that point, it's posted as event parking, and that's
that
why it's
night,
there.
right.
Yeah.
For that.
Well, and if I can add, I do think no matter what we come up with, I totally agree with you, and I like the idea. But we do need some signage, and maybe the Pioneer Center gets a different sign.
Right.
But we need to be able to enforce that we don't want overnight parking.
Right.
We need to put up signs so that the police department can enforce the parking that we intend to be there, and so.
Or people using it for parking all day when they work downtown. I don't think that was the intent of it either.
The other thing we have to consider with the city's lot is, we have a meeting schedule, and there are a number of, meetings where, if we have a full city commission meeting that has a bunch of people coming, we need to pay attention about how we sign this parking lot because, this building does get used after hours quite a bit. So that'll be up to you, Tony. Moving on.
Right. Ours will be more like weekends.
So we're modeling our program after the city of Beaverton. Their program is about 6 to 7 months old, and they have 2 businesses participating so far. So we've learned some from them. For once, we're not the first to do something. We can learn from someone. So moving on to other projects and how we're spending that grant funding.
I got to ask you a question first. Have you talked to Carrie Mitchell?
Carrie Mitchell?
Yeah.
No.
So Carrie owns the lot, kitty corner from the elevator there. And she often posts on Facebook for downtown events that people can use her lot. So she would be somebody I would want you guys to contact.
And this is above the elevator?
Yeah, Carrie Mitchell County is right across the street.
Right. Thank you.
Now you can move on.
So we are conducting a travel behavior survey for downtown. We need baseline data to find out how we're doing with respect to providing those transportation choices. And we also need to track our progress over time. So we'll be doing a lot of data collection throughout the life of this TDM plan ongoing. So our first data collection effort is this travel behavior survey. We are asking people to tell us how they get downtown, how they park, if they park, and we also have some questions to gather opinions on improvements that we can make downtown and kind of how people feel walking downtown, biking, taking transit, etc. The survey is online, so there's a screenshot, and we have paper versions of the survey. I actually have some with me if anyone wants to take one. And I have some postcards if anyone would like to share those. This survey takes about 6 minutes to complete. It's open through November 27th, and we've had about 300 responses so far. Several of us staff, along with folks from Downtown Oregon City Association, have pounded the pavement downtown, doing intercept surveys with visitors, and then also dropping off surveys to downtown employers and businesses, because it's really, really important to get those employees' data of how all the downtown employees get to work. This data is going to support future grants and support, the decisions that we make as the plan moves forward. It will inform our strategies for how we implement this plan. The Regional Travel Options Program that we're getting the funding from has more funding available that we plan to apply for. Some of that is marketing funding, so kind of getting the word out about our travel options and about where people can park and how people can get downtown. And then also infrastructure funding to make improvements to our downtown infrastructure. So we fully intend to apply for more funding, and the data that we have and the progress that we'll be able to show once we start collecting data over multiple years will really, really help us get that. Another project that we'll be doing, and I failed to mention, we have a contract again with Rick Williams Consulting to help us with this survey, and then also to do the second round of it in 2 years so that we can start tracking that progress.
Can you specify that it will close at 11:59 p.m. on the day, or whatever time it's going to close, so it's really clear?
We actually plan to leave it open. We're advertising November 27th, but we'll probably just leave it open online after that. If people trickle in, it's not a scientific survey. So we just want downtown employees, employers, and visitors to take it, and, we'll try to get the best data that we can.
Commissioner Smith?
So I took the survey, and I mentioned this as a concern before, but if this is tied to the parking and the parking lots and how people get downtown, nowhere in the survey does it ask, are you taking the elevator? Nowhere in the survey does it ask if you're parking up above or down below. Nowhere in the survey does it ask whether or not the extension of the hours of the elevator. I mean, that's our only transportation system in the downtown connecting the two, and yet that's not any question we ask. And I find that kind of surprising, because that should be what all the questions were about, in order to how to deal with the parking situation, how people get to downtown. I mean, really, you have two choices. You park downtown or you park above and you use the elevator. So why weren't we wanting to know that?
The first question asked people, thinking of your most recent visit to downtown, how did you travel here? And the choices include, I drove and I parked in downtown. And then the second one is, I drove and I parked above the elevator.
Okay, so there's that one
so
question, but not...
we do have that. We are asking people, are they paying on...
right.
Are they paying for on-street parking? Are they paying for off-street parking? Do they have free off-street parking? And then we do have a question about if you could make 3 transportation investments in downtown Oregon City, what would you add? And so we don't have the specific, expand the hours of the elevator option, but we do have an other option. And the consultants actually sent me the responses that people have entered into there's a generic question at the end that just says, do you want to tell us anything else? And we've had a lot of people write in a lot of great responses. So I think we'll capture that. Another project that we will be doing, we haven't started yet, is to do an update our parking study. So this is the parking study that we did, or, a screenshot from the parking study that we conducted in 2016 to look at the utilization of our on-street and off-street parking. So you're not meant to necessarily be able to read this, but I just wanted to show kind of how we did that, and that we would be updating this study probably summer of 2020 to figure out, where the parking demand is the highest and where we have capacity. And we would be looking at not only this area downtown that's shown in the map, but also above the elevator this time. And then the last bigger project that we would be doing with that grant funding is a bike and pedestrian and wayfinding needs inventory and action plan. So we know that that downtown could use some wayfinding improvements and some bicycle and pedestrian improvements. So we'll be kind of doing an audit to figure out what's missing, how we could improve it, and then prioritizing that list of things into an action plan. So those are the things you can expect to see us come to you with in the next 2.5 years.
Okay, questions?
I have one about your outreach plan for the businesses. So you said you have 2 on board that are ready to start with the parking. The mayor mentioned a business on top of the hill. So what's your plan for, have you targeted, have you already know your list of businesses? How many have you reached out to so far? Is it 2 out of 20? Is it 2 out of 10?
So we're starting small, and one thing is we want to kind of work with some folks who are excited about it at the beginning and show some success. And then hopefully expand that program. So we haven't reached out to everybody. I've actually relied on some help from Downtown Oregon City Association. Liz Hannum has been really helpful with all of this work. And she has kind of talked to a lot of property owners about it even before the code amendments were approved. And so she shared with me kind of her list of folks who she's spoken with, and that's who I contacted. And some of those folks were not actually interested, but some of them were. So I think we're always willing to reach out to more folks, but we also want to start small and kind of show some success, some small wins first.
Okay. This is going to be super nitpicky on the design of the sign. I noticed you modeled Beaver Creek, and it's great. Can you remove the period at the end of the last sentence? There's no periods on any other sentences. Like I said, this is really
good catch. Yes, thank you.
Or maybe that's an
or put periods on all of them. But I think the Beaver Creek signs. I looked at they were the next slide. Beaverton, yeah, not Beaver Creek. Beaverton. I don't think they had any periods. Anyway,
I don't think they have.
Sorry, it was like thanks.
I think that's beyond.
It's bugging me.
No exclamation points.
We should
Oh, maybe exclamation points. That's what it should be.
All right. Any other questions?
No.
I think it might be a good idea to reach out to the chairperson of the McLaughlin neighborhood when, just so that they're aware of the neighborhoods being looked at, because there have been some, concerns that they did not want the neighborhood to be turning into an off-street parking lot for folks, because we have lots of people who live there who park on the street because they don't have garages. Some of us are fortunate and we do have a garage.
Okay. Commissioner Smith.
Just a thought on the signs. If there's issues like, if a sign was made like that where the bottom part could have an insert that gets put in there for meeting nights where it's like event parking only or something like that. I mean, that's easily changeable. Because I could definitely see certain meetings here where we wouldn't want that, but you could just go out on that day and say, okay, there's no parking open tonight, but then it could be removed and there'd be parking. So the main sign would stay consistent, but then you would have the ability to change it if there was an event that night.
We could have John do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's somebody's job to go out there every night. Yeah, that's true. But
anything else? No? I do have one minor issue downtown. Has Bush's, have the PG and Bush's made the transformer switch?
I don't think they did.
On those poles?
I don't think so.
I've only witnessed it for myself because the building hasn't been painted. I haven't really looked closely at the transformer, but I don't believe that has happened.
Well, can somebody on staff follow up with that? Because that was one of the conditions of that grant.
We'll look into it.
All right. Then we're going to move on to PC 19-120, Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan, Beaver Creek Road Design, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor and City Commissioners. So, as you know, the city is currently updating its comprehensive plan and municipal code as it relates to the Beaver Creek concept area. And in that effort, trying to meet the housing and commercial needs of the Beaver Creek concept plan. And out of that triggered lots of questions about Beaver Creek Road. And so staff has taken that further with some study work, which is in your packet. It's really the heavy lifting has been with Christina and Dana, Christina Robertson Gardner and Dana Webb. They're going to present to you the front end of this, and then they gave me some slides of my own too to go over at the end, so we'll do that. So if you guys want to take it off, I think Christina's going to lead the road show here. Okay.
Thank you, John. Mayor, Commissioners, we are back. We were here in the August work session, and you sent us away to do some homework, and we're here to present kind of what we learned this fall and looking for broad direction. Oops, excuse me. So, as always, I always want to remind everybody that the reason we are here is we have been working this last spring to implement the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan by adopting new zoning and comprehensive plan maps and creating new development code. We received a grant from the Department of Land Conservation and Development to do that. That work, that grant has been wrapped up in June, and since June, it's been a staff-directed implementation. Our goal is to build upon the work that we did in 2008 and 2016 when the plan was readopted. But what we heard this spring as we went out for public engagement, that the public was a little wary that 11 years later, there may need to be a fresh look at the design of Beaver Creek Road. So while we are moving forward with the zoning code amendments and the map amendments, and those are moving through the Planning Commission process, we wanted to check back in with the City Commission rather than waiting to the end of the zoning and code amendments. We really want to hear your direction early on because it doesn't help anybody to learn your direction at the end of the process. So we're trying to be proactive and meld kind of the direction of the road design and the code amendments. So when they come back to you, you have a full package and you can adopt whatever the preferred design is with the code amendments. At the August 13th, 2019 City Commission work session, we presented our initial findings. DKS Associates was our transportation consultant group, and they ran the traffic study and found that all the design configurations met the requirements for a rezone. So the adopted 3-lane segment, a 5-lane segment, roundabouts, or traffic signals. So all of those options all met the requirements for rezoning. So it's good. That means that the City Commission can look at lots of different options, knowing that they all potentially meet the requirements for rezoning. At that meeting, the City Commission asked for more information about Holly Lane extension projects, roundabout design, and lane costs. So we're here tonight to kind of share with you what we've learned. We had a design survey that we reached out to the public in October, as well as mailing packets to all property owners that abutted Beaver Creek Road in the concept plan area. You have the raw results that were just tabulated this morning, and I'll share those in the next couple of slides. So tonight we're really looking for some broad directions. We have some specific questions, and Mr. Lewis gets to run those questions with you at the end of the presentation. Hopefully we can have a good discussion about next steps. So the way we are asking kind of for direction is these questions as a preface as you look through the next slides. How many lanes should Beaver Creek Road be within the concept plan corridor? 3 lanes, so it's 1 lane in each direction and a center turn lane. 5 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction with a center turn lane, or transition at some point from 5 lanes to 3 lanes. It is a 5-lane road segment as you move into the Beaver Creek Road concept plan area at Claremont Drive. What type of intersection should Beaver Creek Road have within the concept plan corridor? Traffic signals, roundabouts, or both? Should the city renegotiate with the Oregon Department of Transportation to revise the alternate mobility standards to remove the Holly Lane connection projects from the transportation system plan? And finally, should Beaver Creek Road along the concept plan corridor be constructed by developers incrementally developing or through a capital improvement project all at once? So those are the main questions we're looking for direction this evening. So as we did our research this fall, we learned a couple of things. I wanted to kind of give you some broad feedback on what we thought was interesting as we dove in. The Beaver Creek Road gets a lot more complicated as you move south. There's existing development on both sides. There's existing development on the east side of the road. West side of the road, apologize. As you move to Myers Road and Glen Oak, it really gets very, very complicated. The property acquisition, which Dana will talk about, the roundabouts have potential implications for property acquisition both potentially just some land that we may take away from some people's backyards, or potentially even having to acquire a whole property. And that actually had a lot of cost implications on some of those kind of broad cost considerations we looked at. The other thing that's really interesting is if you look at redeveloping Beaver Creek Road incrementally through development, you pretty much are getting your preferred road design only on the east side. So even if you ask for a 5-lane segment, except for in areas around Claremont or Loader, you're not going to be getting a west side, two lanes in either direction, kind of on the southern part of the concept plan boundary, because there's probably no proposed development happening on the west side. That means that if you want a full 5-lane segment the whole way, most likely it's a capital improvement project, and it may also mean moving the center line of Beaver Creek Road to the east in order to do that.
Could it be a combination of both?
If it's a 5-lane, it probably is a combination of moving it to this.
Okay.
And so by move the center line, it's a lot harder to do incrementally. So that really is lending itself to more of a capital improvement project. So those are some of the big lessons we learned as we dove in. So the survey results, we also wanted to reach out to the public because we went through a pretty broad process in 2008 and involved a lot of citizens through citizen involvement groups as well as open houses and engagement, and a 3-lane section was adopted. And so a public survey went out starting October 24th. It went out to all the emails on our e-blast list, all of our social media channels, all of our boards and committees. We realized the school district posted it on their social media as well as the Chamber of Commerce. So we tried to find as many outlets as we could. What we found, this is the raw results that came in that were tabulated this morning. Generally, all the way through the survey, I would check in every once in a while, and for the most part, roundabouts, traffic signals were generally even, though some days were one was above the other, but they pretty much were with roundabouts slightly more at all times, but there wasn't a dramatic change as the survey went through the process. The preferred road width, stayed pretty solid, which is if the combination of a 3-lane and a 5 to 3-lane transition was generally about even with the number of people who wanted to look at a 5-lane section. We asked people to...
Wait, quick question.
How can you say that's even when they got an 86%?
The 43 and 48, they were running about even.
Oh, those two
if you added those two together, saying a group was saying at some point they did not want to see a 5-lane all the way through, and the people who didn't want to see a 5-lane, these were tracking the whole time about even.
But if you build a 5-lane, you have to transition at some point. I feel like this is presenting 5 lanes with no transition, but it's 2 lanes. I mean, the 5 lanes has to end at some point, and it's going to transition somewhere.
True. I think the question is transition it as have the transition happen as far as you can down Beaver Creek Road.
Well, and I think there's a consideration for future foot traffic trying to get across 5 lanes versus a smaller. Right?
And as I'll explain in the... Think of an opinion people had about this. It is representative in the survey results. Just briefly, we try to get people to prioritize. People have a hard time prioritizing. Everybody wanted everything, and everything was really important. But it's good. You know, these aren't statistically significant surveys. They're a way to get a pulse of the community. And not a lot of people will come to a hearing and sit or even write a letter, but they'll take a survey. So think of this survey really as a pulse of the community. I printed out on your dais as well as back here, we just have the raw comments that came in for all the questions. And really, every comment you can imagine can be found in the packet. So I think in some sense, we did hear from the community, which is the community has lots of opinions about this topic.
Okay, pause here 1 second. So Jim, we have a new roundabout that's only been for a couple of years. Have we had any serious issues with that roundabout?
No, I haven't had any.
No truck accidents, no car accidents, no...
It seems like people just need a little time, and once they do them, they figure them out. And
We're talking about the one.
And that actually was a specific answer to
On the other side of the bridge from the Home Depot.
Yeah, which is a 2-lane roundabout.
Clackamas River, yeah.
More than 2?
No, it's a single lane. The roundabout is a single lane, but each place has a separate, a free turn at the same time.
Some of these proposed roundabouts were more complex than that, were they not?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So I think the main result of the survey is that people have a lot of different opinions about.
I got stuck in a 5-lane roundabout at the Arc de Triomphe for like 2.5 hours. Just to let you know.
Yeah.
So that's probably the world's most complicated roundabout, correct? I'm going to pass this over to Dana Webb, our senior engineer. She's going to talk a little bit through the design work we did on the in-house roundabout study and some of the cost considerations she was looking at, as well as kind of the way we are looking at connectivity in the city and how we're looking at how our future projects may interact with this proposed preferred design.
All right, so I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the considerations. This information is in the staff memo in your packet. So we looked at trade-offs for number of lanes. Obviously, more lanes provides quicker travel during your peak hours. During your non-peak times, it ends up being a vacant lane. That additional capacity from the added lanes can often erode over time as people realign their traffic patterns based on the roads that are congested and not congested. We often refer to that as induced demand. So if you build a 5-lane road, eventually it will become full because people will change their traffic patterns to utilize that open lane.
No, it's going to become full because we're going to build a whole bunch of stuff on the east side of Beaver Creek Road. That's the point.
So some other things that we looked at is future growth. So the traffic modeling that is used in the metro area accounts for growth in Oregon City, but also out in the county as well. So it looks at that future growth for both our development and outside the county, or outside the city, excuse me. And then for major transportation projects, the Myers Road Extension project is under construction now. So once that opens, we'd expect to see some trips that are typically using Beaver Creek to Highway 213 to be able to cut across Highway 213 and access the high school and the college that way as well. So we would expect to see some change in the travel patterns once that roadway opens up. Another project that we have in our CIP list that is in the future would be the conversion of the Beaver Creek westbound yield right turn onto 213 northbound is planned to become a free flow right turn, so that'll flow the traffic through without having to stop and check for a gap, because it would add an additional northbound acceleration lane on Highway 213, so traffic can make that right and get up to speed and then merge in. So these are some of the things that we've started to think about on here. So this slide just kind of shows up at the top a traditional 5-lane signalized intersection, and then at the bottom shows a 3-lane roundabout and a 5-lane roundabout. So one of the things that we would look to implement in the Beaver Creek concept plan area is access to Beaver Creek Road would be at only those 4 primary intersections: Claremont, Loader, Myers, and Glen Oaks. So no direct driveways onto Beaver Creek, which helps us kind of keep that roadway more efficient. So first on the screen is Claremont Drive. So
hold on a sec. So you're talking about taking away the high school access from Beaver Creek Road?
On the east side. So all new development on the east side will need to access cross streets rather than having a direct commercial driveway.
Okay.
So in your packet, you had a comparison of a 3-lane to a 5-lane. So on the screen here, we've added a existing condition slide so you can kind of see what that looks like. So here at Claremont, we currently have a 3-leg signalized intersection. In the center, you'll see a general layout of a 3-lane roundabout. And so for purposes of this discussion, we've placed the roundabout centered on the intersection. So, we didn't take a lot of time to specifically design it. It's a conceptual layout. And then on the right is the 5-lane layout. So here you can see, not knowing exactly what's happening on the east side in the future, we've kind of assumed that alignment for Claremont comes out. The access from the college is kind of skewed a little bit, and so we would, work with that. And then you can see under the roundabout there's a structure here. So, kind of that how timing works. Would that be an acquisition as part of a roundabout capital construction project? Would the roundabout happen at the time that property develops? Those are the kind of things we start to think about as we start to come up with cost estimates for these types of projects.
So when you're designing these roundabouts, you said that you just kind of put these on here, centered them up for demonstration purposes. How much can the design be trimmed and or configured to reduce the property takings?
Once you go out and do the full survey work, there's some of them are a little easier to move around. In this case, if you were wanting to move the existing access for the college, that would be a discussion with the college on, realigning that. And I think you'll see it a little bit more maybe on some of the other ones. So these first two aren't developed a lot around the roundabout. So the property impacts are a little smaller. So if we look at Loader again, so this assumes the realigned Loader Road, not the existing Loader Road. So we kind of look at that. In this case, we assume that this one would kind of curve over and run north of the high school and come over to connect to High School Lane. So again, this one's not, the property's not very developed, so you don't see those structures under the roundabout. Then when we look at Myers Road, which is currently a 3-leg traffic signal, and with the land use approval for the apartments, so on the east side you can see all these small addresses. So these are the addresses of the apartment buildings that have been through land use approval.
The Villages at Beaver Creek.
Villages at Beaver Creek. And so we've started to kind of see what that looks like, and we've placed the roundabout, again, centered at the intersection. In this situation, you could probably squish it a little bit north to have less impact on the single-family homes. In that case, it starts to get to a point where it impacts the school parking lot. So it's a little bit of, knowing exactly how large that roundabout is and starting to kind of tweak that during a more formal design process.
Sure, but there's a big difference in encroaching into a parking lot versus taking someone's house.
Right.
I mean,
but then again, did we have a specific parking requirement for the high school when they built that? So would we be taking parking spaces we were required to build in the first place?
They do have required parking. I don't believe they're very close to their minimum, but we can take a look.
Okay.
So even though it's not built yet, we know we've got a land use approval on that southeast corner right there. So that's a multi-story development, live-work development. We're still not sure where that developer is at in terms of actually turning dirt, but he's got an approved land use approval for that one. And as part of that, he's got what he was conditioned to build was, I think he was conditioned to dedicate. So he's conditioned to build a 3-lane section there, signalized intersection. And then I think he was conditioned to provide an additional right-of-way so that in the future you could add a fifth lane there or fourth lane there. So that, just know that I think we've done a good job with designing that as a signalized intersection, even into the future. But a roundabout, if that were the decision for that intersection, it'd be much more impactful, assuming his development went forward.
How do pedestrians get around over at that roundabout?
You want to answer that?
Sure. So roundabouts, especially a five-legged roundabout, are generally not a preferred option for pedestrians.
Says as we put a roundabout right next to the high school.
Right. I don't think we're going to do roundabouts.
Oh, I think we are.
Well, the last time we had this,
I didn't say here.
Yeah, the last time we had this discussion on Beaver Creek, it was almost like, well, you know, we like the idea of roundabouts, but the practicality of it on Beaver Creek is non-existent. I mean, it's going to be extremely difficult, and especially when you look at decisions that were not made too long ago, you know, in terms of who paid for the signal at that intersection and the houses being built there. I mean, we should have been planning for that at that point. So I think, you know, roundabouts in other parts of the city, but I don't know how we're going to do it here. And on
Sean was pretty clear that they did plan for, you know, an expansion of this in the conditions of approval. But, you know, just from a practical standpoint, when you've got 2,500 kids across the street and you're building apartments where kids are going to be going to school across the street, it doesn't make any sense not to have a signalized intersection there.
Yeah.
Moving on.
So then I'll just quickly show you the Glen Oak intersection is a little bit similar to the Myers Road, where it's developed and kind of trying to squish a 3-lane roundabout is a little bit difficult. If you squish it to the north, you start to impact this structure. This structure here is Clackamas River Water Pump House. So that's not just a single-family structure. A 5-lane roundabout, again, starts to take out more single-family property. So there's some cost estimates in your packet. These are, again, conceptual, based on some assumptions along the properties. For the most part, they all are based on the same concept. They range anywhere from 13 properties where we would need to acquire right-of-way in the event of a capital project, to as many as 42 properties in the 5-lane section. So those are small acquisitions along the frontage. In the 3-lane roundabout, there's been a general assumption that it would be 5 full acquisitions of homes or properties. And in the 5-lane roundabout, there's an estimation of 12 full takings. So that's purchasing existing single-family homes, paying to relocate the property owner, and then demolishing the home, which is why you see the cost estimates in the 5-lane roundabout option high, because that estimates $15 million in right-of-way acquisitions. I'll let John take over.
So, everybody likes to talk about Holly Lane, so I thought I'd take on this little piece of Holly Lane. There's, and when we did the transportation system plan, we did, so this drawing here reflects a lot of the projects that are in the transportation system plan, most of which are on site for the Beaver Creek concept area. And they did a good job of planning for the collector and arterial streets throughout the Beaver Creek concept. One of the projects there included connection of really the heart of the Beaver Creek Road area, and giving folks that are, you know, coming and going from that location an option besides Beaver Creek Road, which would be to take it up to Thayer Road or Maple Lane Road and then connect in at Holly Lane. And the idea behind that, and we saw that reinforced when we did the alternate mobility study, was to help keep some trips that might typically use Highway 213 and Beaver Creek Road and allow them to use Holly Lane. And so that's still the plan. We heard pretty clearly from ODOT that if that assumption were no longer made, so if that connection weren't in our long-range plan, then we would need to look harder again at the alternate mobility study results, because the modeling for Beaver Creek and 213 that we just recently completed assumed that connection was going to occur at some point in the future. So there's obviously on many of these, I mean, Beaver Creek Road, as you just kind of heard in terms of what we plan, how we build it, that's a challenge in itself. The Holly Lane piece, as it both goes through the concept area and then leaves the concept area into and onto city and county property, is that's kind of one of those long-term transportation projects that we need to start thinking about implementing, so we're not tearing down homes to get that roadway to go through there. And as we see development plans and development proposals come forward, making sure that we have that Holly Lane connection that's laid out in a way that makes sense. Because what we see in the TSP they're good alignments, but they're not the details, right? They're very high level, just suggestions that you need, through connection there. They look hard at the traffic numbers, but they don't necessarily spot it on each property where it necessarily needs to be. But we know we need to connect to the other leg of Holly Lane, which is at Maple Lane.
John, do the ODOT comments apply both to if we do a 3-lane version of Beaver Creek Road and the 5-lane, or do their inputs vary?
We would hear the same comment from them, whether it's a 3-lane or a 5-lane, because it's really more about sharing trips with that Holly Lane connection that might otherwise have to use Highway 213 and Beaver Creek Road. That makes sense?
Yeah, I just know how I feel about Holly Lane, and I know that if the base problem is 213, then we're just sort of moving the problem to Holly Lane.
Well, I think, again, in this case, it's about thinking about street connectivity, and we advocate for it on just about every other development that we have in town. Obviously, if we lived in a different part of the world where everything was flat, we would see a lot more gridded streets and things like that. But in recognizing some of the topographic differences that we have, there's not as many options, and Holly Lane is a good option. I know that there's some frustration with that recommendation from folks that live along Holly Lane, and I get it, right? It's no different than Myers Road back in the day when they pushed that through, or other locations where you're trying to get a community that is bisected by power lines or bisected by steep ravines, and you're trying to get those places connected in ways that would hopefully divert some trips that might use that Beaver Creek 213 interchange. I think there's a lot of trips that would, for instance, come down Maple Lane and go straight to, the Beaver Creek Road intersection, and that's close enough to the Beaver Creek 213 interchange that it starts to affect the capacity of that intersection, when in this case they could use Holly Lane and pop right out at the high school there at Myers Road. So there's those kinds of trips that I think Holly Lane is a solution to. So we just wanted to, it's our opinion, and we'll go through that Holly Lane is a needed facility.
Commissioner Wadsmith?
Yes, thank you. So Metro is doing a project right now to revise the alternative mobility targets for the region, and that project's slated to be done, I think, in 2 years. How does that affect this? And my understanding is part of the impetus for that project is Oregon City and not being able to meet our alternative mobility targets. So if we're not building these projects for a couple of years, is it possible that those revised alternative mobility targets for the whole metro region could help us out and maybe help us out of this predicament?
Well, keep in mind, remember, we we are projected to meet our alternate mobility targets. We didn't meet the targets without the alternate mobility. We had to change those targets so that we could meet them. I don't think we know, it's not early enough to know really how the results are going to come through the Metro study. My thought is they look pretty hard at the work that Oregon City did and will model a lot of that. But at the end of the day, does a region have a different target in key areas? Maybe. Will that change this one? I don't know.
My next question, the D58, that parallel road that's running through the concept plan area, is that, I assume that's the parallel road that all the public comments are about? Is that the parallel road that a lot of the public comments are about?
I think that if you're talking about the Holly Lane public comments, or
no, from the survey.
A different one. Yeah.
From the survey?
I think most public comments are people using existing Holly Lane. Actually, as we are renaming potentially the Beaver Creek Road concept plan, I maybe would recommend renaming D58 to be another name because it's confusing people of Holly Lane Extension and Holly Lane, and in the future this may be Thimble Creek Boulevard or something. So, but all those roads create connectivity, as John was saying. And so I think most of the public comments are related to existing Holly Lane.
So what level of road, if we're building houses all the way around that, but yet this is creating a I'll use thoroughfare lightly, but a thoroughfare from Holly Lane down through that parallel road and then out to Beaver Creek Road, those have got to be pretty, I would assume, substantial roads that are going to be built essentially, funneling traffic through a neighborhood area. Are you hoping that most of the people that use that Holly Lane extension would get off at that D54? Like, and maybe this is too in the weeds and we haven't designed it yet, but I mean, ideally we wouldn't want to be shuttling traffic all the way through that neighborhood.
I think like Beaver Creek Road, as you move south on Beaver Creek Road, then the justification, if you will, for more roadway or wider lanes or whatever goes away, right?
Yeah.
It's reduced.
Right.
And that may be true also between Thayer Road and Maple Lane Road. But what we know is it's going to need to be greater than our typical residential street, right? 32 feet is just too narrow with on-street parking. So yeah, I think it's more likely to be a collector road section for us.
How wide is Telford?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm guessing it's definitely
60.
Yeah, it's pretty wide. It's got wide travel lanes, and you can still park on either side of the roadway there. So,
I would think this would be something like that.
Yeah, I bet it's under 60, but yeah.
I guess my only final comment is there's some intersections on Maple Lane. You have a planned roundabout at Holly Lane, and then you have one that's, I'm not sure where it's placed, but that intersection of Thayer and Maple. I used to live over there, and it can be a total nightmare to get out on Maple Lane, depending on which way you're coming from, and people go at the time of day, and people drive super fast. So any I would love for, I know that's probably maybe outside of the concept plan area, but I think our residents who are living in this area would like to know, if possible, when improvements to some of those intersections, which I think some would consider pretty dangerous. And I can tell you, there's no sidewalks or anything through there, because I've run it from Maple Lane all the way to Beaver Creek trying to get the community college. So there's no safe way of travel by pedestrian, by foot from those neighborhoods. And there's a bunch of houses over there, and there's no good way to travel. So I'm hoping that's part of this project.
I totally agree with you. The kind of improvements that you're talking about were also, not only would they be listed in the TSP and not only be part of this kind of whatever it is that we build on Beaver Creek Road, they were also listed in the alternate mobility study as additional projects that needed to happen in order to accommodate the growth that's out there. Because Thayer Road has got improvements on one side, but not on the other. You're right. There's no connectivity right now between Thayer Road and Beaver Creek Roads, and yeah, we're missing a sidewalk on the east side of Beaver Creek Road. So yeah, there's lots of room for improvements like that in what we're not proposing anything different than that.
I guess we have a lot of residents who live here who would love to see improvements to that area prior to us giving priority over new construction. And I'm not saying we don't need new construction and new growth and new houses and all of that, but I just want us to make sure we're thinking about the current residents and the things that little small improvements. I know small is relative, but sidewalks and, a couple of better connections for our pedestrians or little things would make a big difference.
I agree.
I'll get off my soapbox.
So unless there's any more questions, I'll move on to the next slide. So funding. These bigger projects are always, it kind of comes down to, we might want lots of things. We want lots of improvements, bigger boulevards, nicer intersections, better amenities. It's always a question of how we're going to fund this. And in this case, we've got some funding in the transportation system plan for growth. We had a couple intersections and some sidewalk improvements, just like you're talking about in the TSP. But for the most part, when we're talking a 5-lane section, that's not necessarily in our project lists. And redevelopment of some of the existing intersections weren't included in there. But we have other mechanisms, and we use these to the degree we can, where we assemble developer funding, whether it be done at the time of development or whether it be a fee in lieu. Again, if we're talking, I think what you heard from Dana was, if we're talking a 5-lane section, asking a developer that does a key, maybe a key piece, maybe it's a fair amount of frontage, but still, how much of that do they develop now versus do we ask them to pay fee in lieu? And then it gets developed as a city project. Again, still trying to figure out how to put together the funding, but developer funding will, in this case, mostly deals with the on-site street network, right? I think the improvement at Myers Road and Beaver Creek Road, where the apartments, villages of Beaver Creek, they are required to build their whole half side of that intersection. So they're making signal improvements. They're building that entire curb lane, sidewalks, water quality, the whole gamut there. That's a requirement of their development. So we do have a pretty strong hand in that. And I think whether it be build them now or pay a fee in lieu, that's something that can come down the pike and help accommodate this. I've always felt like because it never fails in this community that development always wants to happen at the farthest reaches and at the top of the hill. And that's typically where we don't have utilities or infrastructure to support it. So I've always felt like because of the larger size parcels in the Beaver Creek concept area, getting those property owners to understand that there's value in forming a district that they could agree to fund a local improvement district where they would share in those costs. There is some challenges to local improvement districts in that typically the city funds those first and then they pay back over time. So, given the gap, whether it be transportation improvements or water, for the most part, we just built some sewer out there. But local improvement district, I guess the main point to this is that we have that option. And if we could get it requires a majority percentage from the property owners to buy into that, but that's a good way to fund this. Urban renewal, we don't have an urban renewal district out there, but that's a policy discussion that the commission could have on this. Grants, what we see with Myers Road is we weren't able to get much in the way of interest with regard to grants that paid for that. We got some, and we will continue to pursue grants for projects like Beaver Creek Road. They're likely going to be focused more on the northern end of Beaver Creek Road than the southern end of Beaver Creek Road because there's a lot more challenges at that intersection, regional challenges there. We could take a new look at the transportation SDCs and bring back to you a special SDC, transportation SDC. There's other communities that have done that. North Plains is a good example of that. where you look at really more beyond what we've already listed in the TSP. And if you say, look, the only folks that should pay for that would be the development within that community, and they should do that using a higher SDC, that's a mechanism. There's counterside to SDCs, as you all know, is that you're trying to encourage development through good development, jobs, those kind of things, and yet you're hitting them pretty hard with development charges. So, but it's a tool, and the last tool that we've listed is jurisdictional transfer. We've talked to the county about Beaver Creek Road because we see problems with that as we see development applications come forward. Having them review it versus us review it is a challenge. We noticed it definitely with the live work villages, Beaver Creek. So we have talked to them. Right now, the county with their vehicle registration fee is also looking at a special investment fund, which is supposed to be focused, or at least that's how they kind of sold it to the local agencies, was to be focused on jurisdictional transfers. And so we're still feeling like that's a good way to go with Beaver Creek Road. I think they're thinking one number and we're thinking a much bigger number, but that probably doesn't surprise any of you. But still, jurisdictional transfers and funding that goes along with that would be another tool. Any questions?
Didn't you leave a tool out?
Probably did.
I'm just thinking that in the memo, you talk about another funding mechanism for building the project as building it as a single project, and that would be bonding or capital improvement of some sort. I think that's an option that we definitely need to seriously look at, because I think the way that we've been doing development incrementally and having development pay for it is like death by 1,000 cuts. And if we really want this to be what we want it to be, as many other jurisdictions have done, you take the herd up front and we just build the whole, I'd rather have the whole thing get built, be done, and then as people come in and develop, then they get to pay their share of it. And I think we have the capacity to, look at that. I don't want to put Mr. Parno on the spot, but, I'm sure many heads can be put together to look at this. And I just think that is, had some conversations about how roundabouts and other roadway improvements were done in Bend. We've got other communities as a model to look at how to do these bigger projects. I know in Tualatin, you'd go out towards where the industrial is and there's this big old wide road. Well, they put it in and then the development came and it's there. So you're not having to go back and, piecemeal it in and have, I could just see Beaver Creek Road being torn up about 15 different times. And that just doesn't make a lot of sense.
You're right. Thank you, Denise, for bringing that up. We did leave that off. It's definitely a way to proceed with that. In Oregon City, it would take voter approval to do that, but that's often something the voters would pursue.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so back to our questions. How many lanes should Beaver Creek Road be with the concept plan corridor? We're trying to make recommendations without making recommendations because, they're your recommendations, really. And we're interested in hearing from you, but we also didn't want to just go through all this and not make recommendations. So don't be upset with us if you don't like our recommendations. But we think that, go ahead, Denise.
I think when you presented the last time, there were some recommendations, and there was, as I recall, there was a little bit of pushback from the commission on some of those recommendations. And I mean, they're not much different than what you presented before.
So we can bang through it?
Being caution.
Is that what you're saying? Get through it quickly? Is that kind of the message?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying maybe don't go through it, but not my choice.
Well, we can not go through that. That's another option. I'll leave it up to you.
Are there a bunch more slides?
No, we're just going through each one of these. We're trying to get to some direction, really, is what we're trying to get to. And that can be done through discussion.
I mean, in my opinion, you've always known my opinion, Beaver Creek Road needs to be 5 lanes at least until it gets past the high school. Because with all the development you're doing on the east side, even with a collector in the middle somewhere, most people are still going to use Beaver Creek Road. And so, You need to make that 5 lane. If you can transition from 5 lanes to 3 lanes going down to Glen Oak or whatever, and then back to 2 before you get to, what is it, Holly? Or the other way around, anyway.
Yeah.
That's how I've always felt about it. I still feel that way today.
I concur with that.
And as far as roundabouts out there, I'm no fan of roundabouts, but in some places they do work. They work well down there at the intersection of Clackamas River Drive. But up there with the amount of traffic and the amount of kids and pedestrians and bikes that you're going to have, I don't think that's an ideal spot to put roundabouts.
You're saying
I concur with that.
You're saying the one at Glen Oak?
I'm saying any of the intersections on Beaver Creek.
I think there's a place that they could work on Beaver Creek. And I think that we ought to have the option to do that because, even though we're going to have access restricted in many places, I think we need to really look at how we can, let's expand our transportation horizon and look at something a little different. I'm a little nervous about the 5-lane section, but if you're talking before the high school, I think I could support that. I think 3 lanes is plenty, and transition down to a smaller lane. What I worry about is that, wide, smooth roads and people just drive like little bats out of where.
That's why we have a traffic enforcement team that have been doing an excellent job, by the way.
So for this question, if we could get some consensus around maybe that 5 versus 3 lane, I heard loud and clear 5. We're recommending Loader Road be that transition location. For one, not exactly sure how that high school...
Transitioning from 5 to 3 at Loader?
Right.
Well, that's before you get to the high school.
Right. So that right in, right out, right at the high school, there's still a question in my mind about how you would really tie that in, whether you leave it just beyond that intersection or if you tie that somehow into the roundabout.
You're missing the point, Mr. Lewis. The point is we're building hundreds and hundreds of houses on the east side of Beaver Creek Road across from the high school.
Houses, apartments, places for people to work. There's all kinds of stuff going on over there. Right.
So why would you start with, 3 lanes at the high school going into 5 lanes at Loader Road when most of the stuff is coming from right across the street from the high school? It needs to be 5 lanes all the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you show a map that's
3 of us right there.
That goes from Beaver Creek to where Beaver Creek, the highway to Loader?
I think we have a
Do we have anything
We
like
don't
that?
have one, but we can pull it. Can we pull up the map?
This is essentially the same discussion that we had about the police station. I don't want to be building this now and then having to be rebuilding it again in 25 or 30 years when we've built out that section. We might as well bite the bullet now, build it the right size.
Yep.
You can transition from 5 lanes to 3 lanes heading out towards Glen Oak or Henrici.
I also think this is the same discussion we had the last time we had this discussion about this with the consultant.
It is.
So we're saying the same thing we did the last time we talked about this.
So I think you've got your answer on that question. Let's move on.
Okay.
Well, we got the answer from some of us, not...
Well, when I hear 3 or 4 nodding of heads, that's enough for me.
Okay, so the next question is
to the high school.
5 lanes to High School Drive.
And then transition.
John, they're trying to find a map real quick.
Well, be careful saying High School Drive because High School Drive.
You mean Myers Road.
Okay, Myers Road. Okay. Get it. And then you could transition from 5 to 3 heading out towards Glen Oak and Henrici.
Done. Next question.
Okay, moving on.
I do agree with Denise that if we consider roundabouts, it could only happen on those 3-lane sections, the smaller sections. But I'm not a fan of taking out people's houses.
Yeah.
So I've signalized intersections.
But more importantly, I still come back to we're building a lot of structures over there that are going to have kids and bikes and people riding bikes and all that. How do you get those people across the road with a roundabout?
Well, it happens. I just came from a weekend in Bend, and they've got roundabouts everywhere. I can tell you that it does happen, and with pedestrians, and but Beaver Creek Road is the challenge.
I think you're right. The 3-lane is much more pedestrian friendly.
It's the only area I would consider.
Okay, that
option
helps.
that I would consider.
Thank you. So I can kind
a
of
roundabout.
see from, okay, there's Loader, there's the high school, and then
We also probably have public
There's
comment.
Glen
on this.
Oak.
Do we want to take public comment?
See the gentleman back there.
Hang on, let's do one thing at a time.
okay. All right, that gives, that kind of
So
seeing it
the
all
next-
together helps.
The next question is about what you've already been talking about, which is signalized versus roundabout. And I think, can we just get a confirmation that we've got consensus on that, which is at least between Myers Road and 213, we're talking signalized intersections, Loader Road, possibly a roundabout.
I think we should have the option to look at it.
I think from Myers to 213, use signalized intersections. I think there's going to be too much traffic out there. And I'm not talking about 2 years from now, I'm talking about 30 years from now.
Okay?
I'll concur with that. There's 2. I need 3.
I guess my concern is the reason roundabouts work well in Bend is every intersection is roundabout. I mean, you're going from roundabout to signals back and forth. I mean, that's
Well, and everything they built there is new because all they've been doing is expanding into the desert. We have a completely different topographical problem in Oregon City.
I mean,
They're all over Olympia and Lacey. I mean, roundabouts actually do work.
They work.
They do slow down traffic. I don't think they're appropriate everywhere.
No,
I only think that we could possibly consider them where the roads, have less lanes.
Yeah, 3-lane section, I totally concur with that.
But we're talking about Loader being on a 5-lane section.
But yeah, not for load, not a 5-lane section.
Yeah, I think we're.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is the Glen Oak would be potentially a 3-lane section. Is there consensus on signals versus roundabouts for that 3-lane section?
Is Glen Oak going to cross Beaver Creek?
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't really have an opinion on Glen Oak.
I think did that one have the most impact on private property?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one had a lot. I'm going to go back real quickly.
Yeah, that's the biggest concern.
Oh, that's the one with the
Yeah, I don't want to take that.
Well, Clackamas River
pump
Water,
station.
too.
Yeah.
The pump station. I mean, that's not gonna happen.
signalize
that's not
that.
going to work.
I don't even know why we're
signalize
even
that.
questioning that one.
That's signal.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry,
Next question.
I go back.
I'm okay with that.
Got that one. The next one is about really
No.
Holly Lane and the, we don't want to go back to the alternate mobility
I
study,
think
right?
that's a simple no. Does anybody wish to jeopardize our alternate mobility studies by taking Holly Lane out of the thing?
Well, let's call it something else.
We can do
Holly
that.
Lane. Just say the extension road, because when you say Holly Lane, just like she said, Holly Lane's in my mind. And
The
as
southern connection
Yeah.
to Maple Lane Road.
long as it doesn't impact Holly Lane to the north in any way. I don't want anything going on there.
Okay. Next.
So this one is got to do with just how we try to take on this project, which is a big project. It's helpful that it's signalized versus roundabouts. I will say that. It would be wonderful from a design, from a constructability perspective, to be able to do this as one larger project.
I think this is a subject for an hours-long discussion at a different work session. I don't think you've come up with enough information as far as financing and other things for us to really give you a policy direction at this point. And I think we're going to want to have some time to talk about it.
I think one of the challenges that we have is that we could see, I think what I've heard from planning is we've got a couple of land use applications that are hovering in terms of submittals. So I think our plan right now, until we have that discussion, would be to make the final decision on the roadway section. They would be conditioned to build those just like the villages of Beaver Creek were required to build.
Right.
I don't think you should preclude it. I think you should keep it as the high goal that we might be able to build this all at once, and think about that when we're doing these applications, because I don't want to find out later on, oh, we shoulda, coulda, woulda got this, but we precluded ourselves from that option. We have got to stop thinking that small. We need to think really big and look at how we want this to be instead of how somebody else is going to dictate what it's going to be. And that's the incremental method to me. And I think you heard both Commissioner Lyle Smith and I say we want to look at some roundabouts on some 3-lane sections, not on the 5-lane, but on the 3-lane section. So please don't preclude that. I think we have the option to, again, think big again. I'm trying to say we need to think a little bit broader than our horizon, and it's okay if it's up there. That's a good way to reach a goal, is to reach high.
Okay.
So let's reach high.
And that's how planners think. But the fact is we have real limitations on money.
I understand that.
So you and Metro all go out and plan all this fancy, cool stuff, but then somebody's got to eventually pay for it.
We are going to think big.
So
Not Metro, Oregon City.
I understand the roundabouts on appropriate 3-lane section roads, to consider that in the future.
Yes.
Beaver Creek Road, there are no other opportunities for roundabouts.
Right.
Okay. Well, just wanted to be clear that there's not an expectation that we're going to come back with a roundabout on Beaver Creek, because Glen Oak was the only option, and that's off the table at this point.
That would be a good assumption to make.
I'm just clarifying when I hear come back with roundabouts.
There
are no other options.
I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. So that's okay.
Well, okay.
I can have a difference of opinion. We can move on. I can have a difference of opinion. I'm not convinced that it can't work. So
okay,
let's move on.
I think that's it.
All right. So with that, I'm pretty sure that we satisfied all you folks out there that nobody really has a burning urge to yell at me now. But feel free.
But let's give them a chance anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard our dialogue. I think it would be good to hear from you if you have public comment. I mean, you have to come up to the mic and state your name for the record, please.
They won't always live there.
My name is Jeff Walter. I back up to the pump house at Glen Oak. A few concerns would be, if you drop from 5 lanes to 3 lanes, what's the future development for the airstrip? Are we going to chalk everything down to 3 lanes and then everything be backed up going on to Glen Oak? Do I want 5 lanes behind my house? No. But if it's going to create a backflow or a beaver dam there, then what's the future development going into the airstrip?
So we haven't done any kind. It is the airfield isn't in part of the master plan, is it?
Yep.
It is.
It's been sold, I believe.
Okay.
And so is the golf course.
Yeah, the golf course has been sold. But I guess what we're saying is, 3 lanes at that point. If that really does start to develop out, then we can look at, expanding it farther down towards, Henry C. But, as I said before, we still have a limited amount of money to work with, and I don't want to take any more money out of your guys' pockets than we have to. And
no.
In fact, we still have 60 cents remaining on your property tax that we don't take. So, we're very careful about, spending your money.
Yeah. So that's one concern. And maybe this has been brought up. Going past the high school, right now we take everybody down to 20 miles an hour from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Will that become a flashing light during morning hours and evening hours so that people can travel through there at a normal speed?
That would be
when
nice.
we try and pull out of Glen Oak and everybody's backed up there, a lot of times we're going all the way down
School zone.
Glen Oak to...
That was a lot.
Can we have one conversation at a time, please?
So that's one concern.
Right.
Another concern.
Drove my kids to high school for 4 years, so I completely understand where you're coming from.
My son's a senior. The other concern is there's no sidewalks from Glen Oak all the way to 213.
Right. Well, and the sidewalks would be definitely, that's all part of this. There's going to be sidewalks and bike lanes because, we're mandated by the state now to, we have to do all that stuff. So,
and then what is the timetable for any of this to I mean, are we 2 years out? Are we 5 years out? Are we 8 years out to?
Well, let's see, it took us 18 years to get here.
Okay.
So, it's a long process.
Sure.
I mean, I was on the city commission the first time when we actually brought that land into the urban growth boundary.
Okay.
And, people were screaming, well, you can't develop that now. And I said, don't worry. It's, when you wake up in the morning, there's not going to be 500 houses there.
Sure.
So, it's going to take a long time. I can't foresee us starting on Beaver Creek Road for at least a couple of years.
Okay.
At the very earliest. Am I wrong on that?
More, I would say more.
Yeah.
With the caveat that we have approved those.
Right, no, but what I'm saying is at least a couple of these. And, in government, everything moves at least 4 times slower than it does in the public sector. It's just a fact.
Okay. Yeah, we represent the 3 houses there on the corner that are underneath the 5-lane roundabout, and to hear a signal there is.
You've heard our concerns, and we're not going to do that. So.
Great news. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you guys for your time.
Anybody else? Thanks. All right, then we're going to move on.
Can I ask a question about the school zone?
Sure.
Is it possible to change it to where it's only blinking at school zone for like 7 to 9 and then at 3 to 5 or whatever it is?
Right, so.
I mean, it's a high school, it's not middle school or elementary school, so.
Yeah, so yes, and in fact, that was a condition for the villages of Beaver Creek. So they were to build that as part of their development as their frontage improvements, because a lot of their frontage is in that area where it would be school zone. So yes, it is possible. It needs to be signed on both Myers Road and on Beaver Creek Road, because a lot of people, because the school zone is kind of straddles Myers Road. But yeah, we've heard from mostly folks in the county about the frustration with the fact that it's posted all day. But
I'm not sure I'd want to take away the school zone on Myers Road just because I had kids that were drivers.
No, I wouldn't. I didn't mean to say that we were taking it away on Myers Road. It needs to be, so if we're going to have the flashers.
Just the flashers.
Because the flasher, this is getting into the weeds, but the flasher is going to be on either end. It'll be, south of Myers Road. That's where the flasher will be.
Right.
So if you're driving in on to the end of that intersection.
No, we get it. And yeah, at the other end. So, yeah. Okay. Does that answer your question? All right.
Yeah.
Then we're going to move on.
Do they leave at lunch?
They do leave at lunch. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So moving on to 19/6/26/2020 City Commission meeting calendar, Ms. Riggs. You guys can feel free to leave. You don't have to stick around. Thank you.
Thanks.
Might ask about the high school leaving at lunch. I don't think they do now.
Yes, they do.
He's a teacher at the high school.
Thank you.
Not the whole campus, but enough.
Sure. Seniors want to go out and smoke dope.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Before you is the draft version of the 2020 schedule for the City Commission meetings. If there's any questions about that or changes, I'm here to answer those. And I just want to note that Wednesday, January 1st is a holiday.
I don't want to have a meeting that night.
We have moved it to Thursday, January 2nd. It's up to the commission. If you want to cancel that meeting or not, you can let me know now.
Don't we always do it on the 2nd?
That's what we did the second this past
I'd
year.
rather cancel it.
It's whenever it falls. It's the first Wednesday.
It's because the first Wednesday is the first, so then the charter says move it to the next day.
Or you can cancel it. It's up to you guys.
I'd rather cancel it.
I won't be here, so probably,
So
most
that's
likely.
two
if I
cancels?
can call in, it's fine. If not, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so then our first meeting would then be the work session that would be on January 7th. And then I also want to note that the Enhancement Grant Program Committee meeting has been scheduled for June 4th.
Right, so we're not swearing anybody in as far as commissioners.
There would be the updated commission president.
Okay, well, that would be the only hiccup there. Right. So we would be going 6 days without swearing in new commissioners. So.
I flew in just to get sworn in last time I flew back to my vacation.
All right.
Why are we having the Metro Enhancement? I have a conflict on the first Thursdays.
Okay.
So I'm just looking at that. That's just me. I don't have to go to it, but that's just a day that I hold for something else.
We can take a look at the calendar and we can bring back a new date if that appeases the commission as a whole.
Second Thursday.
Oh, and, let's see, June 4th, I guess that's earlier. Just to note that it's the June 10th through 14th or whatever, after the last week of school, that second or third week is South Fork Water will be, some of us will be in Orlando.
Okay.
Doing South Fork?
South Fork, yeah, ACE Water Conference or.
I think the U.S. Conference of Mayors is like a week after that.
That'll be a hard month to.
All right, anybody else have any other issue with the calendar? Then we'll move on. Mr. Manager, you got a Metro 2020 transportation thing to give us?
We do. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lewis.
Right, so let's see. Metro's 2020 Transportation Initiative, I think all of you probably know about this, so this is more of a community update, but we're trying to give you as much information as you might want, and maybe then some. But it's time to, according to Metro, and Metro is working on this, it's time to invest in a transportation system that works for everyone, and help Metro shape the regional transportation funding measure that could go before the voters in November of 2020. So that's what this presentation is about, and we just wanted to share the information with you so that you would, if asked, know more about it. So Metro has been working on this for some time now. They've convened a task force that's working pretty heavily on the values and the outcomes of what a possible transportation investment might look like. Additionally, they've identified a local investment team or multiple teams in each county to dive into the needs and identification of the corridors. In Oregon City's case, it's the McLaughlin corridor, so we'll talk more about that in a minute. But these especially the local investment teams, they're basing their feedback on what Metro staff has shared and presented for their draft recommendation in the investment package into the task force. With the presentation, so we're going to go ahead and provide an update on the potential measure and an overview of the Metro staff recommendation on the investment package and how this would benefit Oregon City. So the key values and outcomes, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but easing of congestion. Sorry, the mayor left because we wanted to emphasize that there are congestion enhancement projects in this measure or in the proposed measure that they haven't formed a measure yet, but in the package that they put together. So for Oregon City, it's mostly McLaughlin Boulevard at 99E and I-205, where they'll be adding the left turn lanes for both the onbound directions. But there's several others across the region that will also ease congestion in the region. Safety is another big one. There's 160 fatalities within the corridors that have been identified and 1,124 severe injuries between 2007 and 2017. So various projects have been recommended to address safety. The equity in the corridors range from 32% to 100% of the corridor in equity focus areas. And then always Metro is looking to leverage other dollars with their with whatever funding mechanism that they've chosen. So it seems like every grant round, every program that they come up with, they're always wanting to leverage those dollars with more dollars from Metro to pair the two together to build better projects. So the scenario that they're looking at is a $3.1 billion investment scenario. So again, they've formulated this based on information that they've heard from this task force and the investment teams. So they're assembling these packages, and for Clackamas County, they've got $390 million. I know I didn't attend the C4 meeting, but Rachel L. Smith did. So maybe you could share a little bit about what the thoughts were about the county's 3.9 million, but the summary version of that was there was feeling like it wasn't a big enough ask. So, you know, be that what it may, I don't know if they're going to be able to make any progress on that or not, but
I mean, there was definitely some complaints about the distribution of the funds.
Right.
And there's definitely a core group of cities that are trying to meet to work on messaging, and, you know, we want to be tactful, but we want to be pointed. And at the same time, I think there's still some holdouts of possibly moving some other Clackamas County projects up as Tier 2 projects of moving into the project investments at a later. So Highway 43 is one of those. It's currently in Tier 2. This is just looking at Tier 1 corridors. So. And it's a substantial investment, but obviously Highway 43 has a direct connection to our residents who may be commuting north into Portland, so that would be a project that we would want to support, for example, in trying to get that into the Clackamas County bucket.
But I think the other thing you have to realize is this is pure pie in the sky at this point.
Yes.
All right. The region just passed the housing bond 2 years ago, and now we passed a $500 million parks bond just a couple of weeks ago. And then Metro's going to come back and ask for another $3 billion in property taxes. At some point, people are going to start saying no.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But in the meantime, we're trying to focus on, for Oregon City, we're trying to play and participate and make sure meaningful things happen for our citizens as well.
Yeah, right. If it does get passed, we want our project.
No, I agree, but meaningful means, you know, actual projects that make the road system work better. And if you drill down into this, it's about 3/4 bike and transit and ped, which doesn't help us at all in Oregon City. Not a bit.
One thing that I wasn't sure about, and maybe you could tell, so this package, as written here, leverages little over $2 billion in potential funds. Did they articulate which regions that came from? Because that would be
they're not including that leverage money into these numbers. So when they say they're leveraging, you know, $1 billion, that's going straight to the Southwest Light Rail project. It has nothing to do with this.
Well, I don't know that we've heard that officially from them, but I was looking through this. I'm not sure how
all you have to do is read the coverage.
Yeah, so the Metro staff recommendation does list out the leveraged funds, and it would be $1.4 billion in federal funding for the Southwest Corridor. That's part of that. But there's also $450 million leverage for the Burnside Corridor, $160 million for 82nd. So there's some others listed.
So they did break that up for us. That's good.
Yes.
But those numbers aren't included in this 3.11 billion, right?
No.
They're in addition.
That's the $2.13 billion in leverage funds.
So none of those quote leverage funds helps us here in Clackamas County at all.
Well, was there anything listed for Clackamas
There's
County?
not any leveraged funds for the Clackamas County.
I thought the meeting, there were some leverage funds for McLaughlin when we were at the Metro meeting at Abernathy Center. I heard somebody say that.
Well, I guess my point on that, if we go back to that slide, is the $390 million, if you take into consideration the leverage funds or lack thereof, you know, Washington County maybe is doing more to leverage funds, and maybe that's why they deserve more. I don't know the science there. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, I would say the other area of contention is projects that are assigned to Clackamas County as regional projects. So like Southwest Corridor project, because it goes down and does affect the, you know, southwestern side of Clackamas County, it gets tacked on as a regional as a project for Clackamas County. Another one was like a project up by the airport where folks leave here, head up to the airport, some type of airport or port project. So there's some of that going on.
And I'm sure the McLaughlin corridor is tagged as partially a regional project too.
Oh no, McLaughlin's, I think, all ours, Clackamas County.
Not sure if these are those regional investments that you're talking about, but they're definitely, there's 1.3 billion in funds for region-wide investments, and some of the things that they listed there, safe routes to school, which would be applicable and usable in Oregon City, active transportation, regional connections. So again, that's more of the pedestrian bike side of things, but it does, in theory, take some folks out of their vehicles and puts them into other modes of travel. And Main Street revitalization, and again, as good as our Main Street's doing, I think there's still another half of Main Street to be built in Oregon City, so I'd love to see some of those funds come our way as well.
I just have a hard time with, people saying that by building bike routes and pedestrian stuff, that you're taking people out of your cars, when the fact is, if you look at the statistics over the last 10 years, people biking in Portland is going down. People using transit in Portland is going down. Yet we still are throwing tons of money at things that obviously don't work.
I hear that, and I fully agree. There's, I don't know the statistics. Sounds like I do, but one of the big challenges that I think that we have when we're in these urbanized areas is that building wider, as we were just kind of looking at with the Beaver Creek concept plan and that roadway. That becomes a challenge too, right? I mean, I try to think, what could we do to make 99E through Oregon City carry more traffic? Short of signalization improvements, maybe some turn lane. We've eked out as much efficiency as we can afford to build, and that's not true in every corridor. I'm just saying that there's corridors where it's really a challenge and a limit to get much wider.
That's why you get the bus.
When I look at 15th, 14th, just even today, those are bottlenecks in the city that I don't know how they get any wider.
Okay, let's move on. Oh, Commissioner Smith, I'm sorry.
John, I appreciate this, but I don't feel that this is your, I feel like, why is Metro here? I mean, you gave the presentation for Metro last.
Metro's afraid to come to Oregon City now.
And they have the answers. So if they want us to promote this plan, then they need to be out here telling us why. That's not your job. And last week you did their presentation for them too. And I appreciate that. But if we have questions for Metro, they should be sitting out here answering them. And, if they think that they don't need, if they need Clackamas County voters to support this, then they need to tell us why. And because right now we have no reason to. Right. Now clearly $3.9 million is $390 million is great, but we don't know really if that's equal to everything else. And so just settling for that and then going out there and touting this without really knowing the details. If they want us to know the details, they need to sit here and tell us.
I had a conversation with President Peterson after we did the tour at the wastewater plant or the waste transfer, the transfer station, and she kind of took me to task for the way we had treated Metro staff when they came on one of those. I don't remember what it was a garbage thing or something else. I don't remember. Food. And I said, well, if you don't want us to treat staff that way, then send your electeds. Let your electeds take the heat.
There you go.
So, I'm not sure why.
Staff with answers.
Why, or have staff sit in the back, and just like John does at C4 and other things, if I have a question, I can turn around and ask. But, these folks need to be bringing this to us instead of us having to use your staff time and our time to have something explained to us that is, frankly, I think, less than a 50% odds of actually passing.
I don't know that Metro asked them to bring this to us as much as me, Dana, and John are often participating in C4 and Metro Policy Advisory Council, and these are the conversations that are happening. And if you want to know what's happening, things that are coming, then we deserve to get an update. If you want every update to come from a Metro person, then that's a totally different conversation. But we have staff that are investing their time and energy to make sure that Oregon City interests are being represented, and they're trying to just give us an update on that.
But if we don't know, I mean, if we don't have the ability to get the answers to the questions, which we haven't been.
Right. I don't disagree with you, but I think, you know, I'm not sort of like voting on every little thing we do in Oregon City. You're going to have a public vote. But at the same time, this is a major deal.
Yeah.
And they're taking major time on it. And from what I can tell, they specifically used the elected officials that they got because they all buy into Metro's, you know, bike ped theme.
Dan, may I ask John a question?
Sure.
So, John, I really appreciate your bringing this forward, and I look forward to hearing more about you and Rachel and Dana's impressions about what's going on at C4, because I think it's really critical for us to be aware of this, as Rachel said. I think the question that I would have is just getting maybe a little more detail on kind of the McLaughlin Boulevard project, because I will be honest, I didn't really feel that it was fully covered at the session we had at the Abernathy Center. It was, I didn't really anticipate that they were going to ask those panelists about, well, what are your transportation challenges? And it was like, I thought we were going to talk about the projects in Clackamas County. So that was I was a little taken aback. Not that it wasn't interesting, it just wasn't what I thought I was going to hear when I was there. So I do appreciate this, because I will dive deep into it when I need to, but for right now, this is perfect. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you too as well.
Did you have a slide on the McLaughlin?
Yeah, we do. We'll slip to that.
You might want
to. So there's lots of these neat areas where this package hits on McLaughlin Boulevard. So we'll go through a variety of these, but obviously enhanced transit is one of those. Safety in the corridor, the I-205 ramp improvements, they're still on the table. Willamette Falls Bike and Ped Plan, that's between 10th and really the railroad tunnel. That's trying to figure out how to get, pedestrians to be able to walk safely along 99E. The Park Avenue Park and Ride, again, if you're not using it, but that facility is full,
Just to add to the parking garage at the end of the orange line.
So this would add 2 stories to that.
Which would be really great for our
And then just better corridor planning in the corridor. So
and the trolley trail. You got to mention the trolley trail.
And the trolley, and we got slides for it. So I'm going to go pretty quick. Just 2 stories to the Park and Ride. So the Park and Ride expansion. There at the end of the orange line. I won't go through this in detail, but just, enhancements to get folks that maybe could not be on the roadway to use alternate modes of travel. The trolley trail bridge is really taking Portland Avenue in Gladstone and connecting it back up with the Oregon City Loop Trail through the Cove area, and replace the old railroad bridge with another bridge. So they're looking at several options for how to do that, but that's got some more money associated with it to complete the final design of that, not construction, but final design. We talked about the 2 left turn lanes, and this is true at both on-ramps, is it not? No, it's both. Yeah, both on-ramps. So if you're headed on 205 north or south, you would have an additional turn lane to get onto that facility. The Willamette Falls Bike and Ped Plan, again, that's from 10th to really the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. That's the main destination, but try to figure out how to get pedestrians over, around, under, whatever it is, the Highway 43 bridge, and then have a adequate walking trail along the edge there.
Could you stop
over the viaduct?
Just a quick second. So I was coming from Kanema the other day, and I noticed that when you come down from Kenema, you come through the railroad bridge, it is signed at 35 miles an hour as you come around the corner, and then you get up to 14th, still 35, but in the distance you can see a 40-mile-an-hour sign, I guess, as you head under the Abernathy Bridge. So people are whipping through here at a fast rate of, I mean, they're not going 35, they're going way faster than 35. So I'm looking at you and looking at you, and is there some way that would make this a little safer by getting that traffic to go what it's supposed to be?
Actually,
because I've walked all the way from 14th along the river and, you know, on that trail and then back up here, and you're just getting whipped because, again, they're not, if they were going 35, and let me use my friends in Milwaukee as an example, it would be so much more pleasant to walk along there. And the pedestrian improvements would be great, but it would really go a long way if we could get the traffic to slow down. Because it's beautiful to walk along the road, but it's not fun to walk when they're going 40, 45 through there. They're coming around that corner and they're just taking off.
I drive that on a regular basis because I
know you do.
To Canby back and forth. I have noticed our traffic enforcement team tends to really like to sit right at the base of the bridge abutment on the north side, and they work that area on a really regular basis. And I, generally speaking, I get caught in traffic and we're doing typically 30 to 35. I try never to go over 5 miles over because that's where I set my cruise control so I don't get one of Jim's guys on my tail. So there are guys there. No.
Jim's guys.
Yeah. Well, I think Milwaukee has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit.
The way and so do we on that section of 99.
And they're known for being very stringent on their tickets.
The difference is that they have photo radar, and that's why everybody slows down.
Yep.
Yeah. They have a van, but they don't have photo radar on the street. They have a photo radar van.
Used to. They no longer have their van. Oh, really?
Where did they go?
Anyway.
Can we get one?
Good question.
Can we get one?
No, I hate photo radars.
But anyway, it would help the pedestrian experience along through there. Because I pulled out there today and I had a clear zone, and I'm telling you, some guy came up on the tail end of my car as I pulled out from the U.S. Bank lot. I had to step on it.
How much more of this do we have, John?
Basically, just to let you know that really Metro is going to make their final decision in May. So there's lots of meetings between now and then. We just wanted to share the information with you so you would, know if you didn't know. And I know you guys are very informed and know lots of these things. So we're just kind of trying to keep you in. And the next time there's an update, we'll make sure Metro's here to provide that. Because I don't disagree with all that.
All right. Thanks, sir. I'm going to hold all my commission reports for the next time because I've got a whole bunch of stuff coming up this week. We've got wastewater interest group coming up, Willamette Falls Locks, the Legacy Project, Metro Mayor size. So, I can give a report then.
Could I just give a couple of brief updates?
Yes.
As well. I'd like to introduce in the back of the room, Mr. Don Robertson. He's our interim community services director who's filling in while we do the search for the new community services director. So if you have questions about parks related activities or whatnot, Don would be a great resource. Obviously you can come through Katie or I as well and we can get you the right information.
He's going to take care of all that for maintenance before he leaves, right?
Take care of it.
Take care of everything.
We'll take care of it tonight.
So same number as the previous person?
Yes.
Same direct dial number?
Yes.
Okay,
yep.
got it.
And his email is in the system as well. So if you just go to and add Don Robertson, you'll be able to get to that. So welcome him and glad to have him on board. Just a quick update about the, I had mentioned last time that we had some Dutch elm disease on that we identified in 3 trees at the library. Right out front, there was a dead one that you would have noticed over the summer there. We are going to move to take that one down immediately. We have a program in place. So what they did is they took tests of those 3 trees. They did come back positive for Dutch Elms disease, as well as a beetle infestation in the dead wood. So the 1 tree is going to come out. They do not recommend reusing that wood because of the quarantine requirements in the state of Oregon to deal with that wood. The other 2 you're going to see, we're going to be moving out, and they're going to, so essentially Dutch elms can transfer through beetles or through when the roots of different trees graft underground. So you're going to see we're going to be trenching around the 2 trees that are infected right now to try to stop the spread to the other elms. That will also be continuing with spraying those in the spring and monitoring. You'll also see some dead wood removal, which will hopefully limit the beetle infestation, as they tend to go to that dead wood that you see in elm trees.
So is Dutch elm curable, or is it just sort of a chronic maintenance thing?
I think it's a chronic maintenance thing, depending on when you catch it. So we're going to try and see what we can do for the 2 that have tested positive for that Dutch elm. There'll be a replanting that will occur once we get to a point where we can replant some of those trees in there to replace the elm that's coming out. So we do anticipate to have information at the library about what's going on. We'll put a signage up out front. But so you will see some of that activity moving forward, especially getting that dead one out of there with all that dead wood in it. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
So to follow up on that, we are, after some different revisions at the police site, we are going to have to remove at least a couple of trees on that site because of electrical undergrounding and some other issues. And so we're going to be talking to our public PR people and getting that information out well ahead of the time that we have to take those trees down. Just so there's no surprises anywhere. Every intention was made to save those things, but because of the city's own code, as far as undergrounding the utilities, there's no other place we can go to get there to do that. So
There's my understanding as well, is that we were working through looking at the 2 oak trees in front of CD there, where we need to move those high power, the PG line. I didn't know if anybody wanted an update on Singer Hill, or,
I think we kind of figured it out.
Okay.
What's the timeline, though?
The consultant who did the work when the rock fell, they came out and looked at it yesterday. I think they can start in about 2 to 3 weeks. You'll probably see some barricading go up. We're going to keep, right now we can keep the staircase open. We'll keep it open as much as we can. If not, we'll provide that notice when we are closing it. So hopefully in about 2 to 3 weeks, they'll be able to get out there, do the work. It's probably a 2 to 3 week project to get through that as well.
maybe we should put a NASCAR crash fence up there at that corner. That's like the second car in a year that's gone over the edge there.
Yeah, first one wasn't nearly like this one, but yeah, it's came down that, well.
Yeah.
Don't drink and drive.
Exactly.
I was kidding.
That's all that I.
All right. So I told you I'm not going to. Does anybody have anything to update tonight?
I do actually, and I have one thing that I missed out on the beginning of the meeting. But I went to the open house for Dev Northwest, which is just down the street. They're a housing developer of middle income and low income housing, and I talked to Tony about possibly inviting them in to do an informational presentation to us at some point in time in the future, and I was wondering if that would be okay. I think they could be a partner with us on some possible projects, or we could refer them to possible projects for our area, but they are looking for some land in our area to do a development. So it was real interesting and informative. I just wanted to do quickly, you heard from DOCA here, and obviously they're going to be looking forward to getting the contracts approved. Wanted to let you know they're recruiting some new board members. We've had one board member resign. I believe that was Mike Mitchell. And they've been having regular meet and greets with business owners and property owners. And just wanted to remind everybody that Small Business Saturday is coming up on November the 30th. And I participated in my first, and hopefully not the last, trick or treat. And it was, all I can say is that I'm still trying to recover from that. It was overwhelming. I cannot believe how many people in our community need candy. But
they don't need it.
Well, I know they don't need it, but they think they need it. They want it. But anyway. And then on the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage area, they are still working very hard to get the congressional legislation for the National Heritage Area. But as you can understand with the news today, there's a little bit of distraction on some other topic. So that has not been moving, but it is anticipated that when the former chair and our former mayor, Alice Norris, returns from her sojourn, that she'll be asking to schedule an update to reaffirm Oregon City's support for the National Heritage Area legislation that Kurt, Peter, Earl, and Mr. Walden, all of our representatives, and Suzanne are all on board and working very hard to try to get that through the noise that's going on with this other thing that's going on. So that's it.
We're adjourned.